Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something, well, something truly profound. When most folks think about ancient religious texts, they usually picture dusty, dense encyclopedias filled with archaic rules, right? But what if I told you that one of the oldest texts in Theravāda Buddhism is actually this highly sophisticated, meticulously detailed psychological blueprint of the entire universe? Seriously, move over Myers-Briggs. Today, we are decoding the Abhidhamma. We're going to explore how this ancient framework maps out not just ultimate reality, but the very mechanics of human behavior. It's fascinating, it's highly structured, and it has absolutely incredible implications for how we understand ourselves today. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of this text, I've got a fundamental question for you. Who are you, really? I know. It sounds like a totally philosophical cliché, but just bear with me and take it seriously for a second. Are you your thoughts, your body, maybe your personality traits, or your memories? If you stripped away every single one of those elements, what exactly would be left? This isn't just some late-night thought experiment. This exact question is the literal starting point for a mind-bending exploration of the self that was mapped out thousands of years ago.
Section 1. Blueprint of the Universe. Exploring the third book of the Abhidhamma Piṭaka.
Section 2. Deconstructing the illusion of self. The logic of the Dhātukathā. Okay, let's really dive into this. The source material we're looking at centers on the Abhidhamma Piṭaka. Now, scholars of Buddhist philosophy will tell you that this specific text is considered the absolute heart of Theravāda epistemology. And here's the thing, it doesn't tell stories, it doesn't offer comforting parables. Instead, it delivers a rigorous, highly systematic categorization of reality split into two main works. Let's look at the first half, the Dhātukathā. This acts as a logical tool designed to expose what is essentially a massive magic trick, the illusion that the self is a permanent, solid thing. The Dhātukathā uses a crazy advanced logical method, basically a phenomenological dialectic, which is just a fancy way of saying a rigorous method to break down our conscious experience. The formula it gives is shockingly simple yet completely profound. What we call I, or the self, is ultimately just a temporary assembly of physical and mental phenomena. Form and mind, matter and consciousness. It shows us that these components are just briefly crashing together, interacting based on specific causes and conditions, and then, poof, immediately fading away. There is no permanent you sitting behind your eyes pulling the levers. It is entirely a process. To actually prove that the mind is a process, the text gives us the concept of sampayutta, which means mental association. And it reads literally like a precise scientific formula for how thoughts and mental states combine. For mental phenomena to truly associate, they have to meet four very strict conditions: arising together, ceasing together, sharing the exact same object, and relying on the exact same base. Think of it kind of like code running an app on your phone, right? You have all these different elements perfectly synchronizing for a split second and then vanishing. It brilliantly demonstrates that the mind is just this rapid-fire, active process of these conditions flashing in and out of existence. It's definitely not a permanent, solid entity. Now, what's really fascinating here is the paradox. We just spent all this time totally destroying the concept of the self using the Dhātukathā. That's ultimate truth. But the very next text in the sequence, the Puggalapaññatti, completely flips the script. It immediately sets about rebuilding the concept of the person. Why on earth would it do that? Well, because while ultimate reality dictates that there is no you, we still have to, live and function and interact in a physical society. So it introduces conventional truth. It reconstructs humanity on a practical, everyday level so we can actually navigate the world and develop ourselves ethically. Section 3, Mapping Psychology and Behavior. The practicality of the Puggalapaññatti. Because we exist in this conventional world, we need practical labels. The Puggalapaññatti acts as an ancient, incredibly detailed psychological map. It actually categorizes people based on their behavioral habits and their potential for spiritual awakening. It's honestly like an ancient personality test. For example, the text carefully distinguishes between someone who is easily angered, meaning they're prone to sudden emotional outbursts, and someone who is vengeful, meaning someone who holds on to a deep-seated, simmering grudge. Psychologically speaking, those two require completely different interventions. It also breaks learners down into 4 types of intellects. This ranges from the quick-witted person who grasps a concept instantly, all the way down to the person who requires immense, repetitive effort just to learn the basics. So we're not talking about abstract philosophy anymore. This is a remarkably modern, pragmatic understanding of human behavior explicitly used for education and self-improvement. Section 4. Decoding the complex texts. The role of commentaries and subcommentaries. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, how do we actually know all of this today? Well, the original texts of the Abhidhamma are notoriously terse, like incredibly dense. They're basically shorthand formulas packed to the brim with technical vocabulary. If you were to just read the raw text, it would look like a complicated math equation with no legend. And that brings us to a really crucial term, hermeneutics. This is the rigorous science and methodology of interpretation. Brilliant minds like the ancient Lama monk, Venerable Anattā, wrote extensive, incredibly detailed decoder manuals to ensure these complex, terse texts weren't misunderstood. These scholars in Southeast Asia essentially built a highly academic science of interpretation. Their goal? To preserve the absolute purity of the Buddhist teachings on ultimate reality and psychology, making sure huge concepts like non-self and mental association survived completely intact over millennia.
Section 5. Ancient Wisdom as Grief Therapy, Thai Funeral Rites, and the Abhidhamma.
So, how does all this incredibly abstract philosophy actually connect to our everyday world? Well, we can see it beautifully in how the Abhidhamma is practically applied today, specifically in Thai culture during one of society's most difficult moments, funerals. In Thailand, it's a deeply ingrained tradition to chant the 7 books of the Abhidhamma during funeral rites, and researchers have profoundly recognized that chanting these books isn't just some spooky, mystical ritual for the deceased. Not at all. It's actually a highly targeted grief therapy process for the living. The repetitive chanting of these specific, deeply analytical texts is intentionally designed to carefully guide the grieving minds of the family and friends. The really crucial point here is what these chants are actually reminding the listeners of. They actively reinforce the ultimate truths. First, Anicca, which is impermanence, meaning everything changes. Then Dukkha, the suffering inherent in holding on to what changes. And Anattā, or non-self, the reality that we are just temporary assemblies. Hearing over and over that the self is just a fleeting combination of elements helps the grieving mind let go of that deep attachment that causes so much pain. But, and this is key, it perfectly balances this with the practical side we discussed earlier. It reminds the living that while you're still here, functioning as a conventional person, you have a fundamental duty to cultivate morality, do good deeds, and really develop your potential. The Abhidhamma is, without a doubt, a masterpiece of human thought. It deconstructs us all the way down to our fleeting mental atoms and then painstakingly rebuilds us into ethical beings, fully capable of growth. It's truly a map of the universe inside your own mind. So I want to leave you with this final, thought-provoking question. How does understanding your own components, really realizing that your anger, your ego, your very sense of self are just temporary, conditioned processes, change the way you choose to live today? Take a moment to really think about that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I genuinely hope this ancient map helps you navigate your modern world just a little bit better.